Yuan become the world reserve currency. What is the world reserve currency? Reserve currency is a foreign currency held by central banks and other major financial institutions as a means to pay off international debt obligations or to influence their domestic exchange rate. US dollar becomes the world reserve currency in 1944 after the Bretton Woods Agreement. After the Allied force won the World War II, everyone was bombed out. There was no infrastructure and no capacity in other countries. Only the US had manufacturing capability back then. They are the strongest nation at that time, and because of that, they have the power to come to the table and say, we are the last man standing. We are essentially the gold standard, and nobody would dare to disagree to that. So that was how it all came about. What does it mean to be the world reserve currency? It means that you are the world money and that you can pay your bills in your own currency. It also means that there is great demand for your money because it is a reserve of all the central banks. For everyone to buy oil, to buy any goods and services, even gold, those transactions are denominated in the US dollar. This means there is a huge market for your currency. It means that markets for your assets denominated in the US dollar, is vast. This means that you become the world financial center because any investment instruments issued in the US dollar is liquid and marketable. This means foreign central banks have to keep their reserves in your currency whether they like it or not. So these are definitely enormous advantages that Britain once had. When you lose the advantage, you lose a lot. Now, the US is in the process of losing the advantage. It's losing it because over time since World War II, other nations were already built and United States is no longer the only country that can make things. So let's get to know a little bit more about both nations. First of all, the US economy grew by 2.2% in 2012, while China's economy grew by 8%. The United States has nearly 16 trillion debt, while China has almost no debt at all. The United States has almost no cash on hand, while China has 3.2 trillion in cash. The United States has to borrow nearly half of every dollar it spends, mostly from China, while China's foreign reserve is growing ever larger day by day. The US has an unemployment of around 8%, while China has an unemployment of around only 3%. Securities valued at more than 6 trillion US dollar and growing trade on Chinese exchanges every day. China enjoys the largest foreign capital inflow on earth, surpassing US as the world's favorite place to invest. China is now the #1 mine operator, the #1 manufacturer, and also the #1 exporter in the world. So basically, we have heard the same story so many times, that the Chinese has pegged their currency artificially low to the US dollar. By doing so, they have captured US manufacturing. The Chinese now makes everything, while the US makes nothing. As a result, the Chinese has collected all this wealth, all these US dollar, and the Americans, in order to buy these Chinese goods, are borrowing from the Chinese. The Chinese economy has been ascendant. They are growing very rapidly. They are the second largest economy in the world after the US, and so on. Basically, the US is not raising living standards. China, meanwhile, has undergone an amazing increase in living standards. Its real estate and infrastructure are booming. The US is dismantling its infrastructure while China is building them up. So basically, they are going in different directions. Now, these are all the things that we have known and heard so many times. In this video, I'm going to talk about something that is slightly different. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are the 5 fastest growing economies and are rapidly emerging as the world's superpowers. The combined GDP, population, and trade volume of these 5 countries are gigantic. Any decisions made by BRICS would land a severe blow on the US as well as the rest of the world. China and Russia has been trading among themselves in their own currencies for the past few years, ditching the US dollar. Recently, at a BRICS annual meeting, they decided to ditch the dollar and use their own currencies in mutual trade, putting the US dollar in jeopardy. With so much trade no longer transacted in the US dollar, we shall see a rapid descent on the significance of the US dollar. We have already seen countries in other parts of the world start to move away from using the US dollar in global trade. China and Japan, for example, the second and third largest economies in the world, had reached an agreement to start promoting the use of their own currencies and trade with one another. Even Singapore is moving to trade in Yuan. Therefore, if BRICS succeed in maintaining a foreign currency exchange among themselves, this will definitely erode the US dollar status. As that status is being eroded by BRICS, it is going to start affecting the US, specifically its ability to fund its own debt. This will exert pressure to the Federal Reserve to go to printing mode to print more and more US dollar, accelerating the decay of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. China is definitely very serious in its effort to hoard gold. To see why, let's take a look at the news. News sites around the world has been reporting China's tremendous purchase of gold in these past few years. For your information, the Chinese government has recently removed all restrictions on personal ownership of gold. China is currently purchasing 100% of domestic gold mine production. China has imported over 750 tons of gold in 2011. This translates to 27% of world output at that time. China has stated publicly its intention to add 1,000 tons of gold per year to its central bank reserve. China is buying major stakes in foreign mining gold company. As a result, this has caused China's reserve of gold to increase significantly. The scale of this initiative is extraordinary. It is as if China is preparing the ascent of the yuan as the world reserve currency when the USD dethrones in the future. When the US financial system crashes, what do you think the rest of the world wants? The USD that is rapidly becoming worthless, or yuan, a currency that is backed by gold? A lot of people has been saying that yuan is not fully convertible, thus impossible for it to become the world reserve currency. Right now, there's a great amount of difficulty in making the conversion because of high government policy. But guess what? China plans to make its currency fully convertible for trading on international markets by 2015. So, by buying gold and making the yuan internationally convertible, China will weaken the US dollar as the world reserve currency. Oil has been one of the main reasons why United States currency has done so well. Well, back in 1973, the United States and Saudi Arabia agreed that all oil sold by Saudi Arabia would be denominated in US dollars. This petrodollar system was adopted by almost the entire world, and it has had great benefits for the US economy. The fact that the only way you could buy oil was by using the US dollar reinforced its position as the world reserve currency. Much of the violence in the Middle East and Africa stems from challenges to US power. Take Iraq for example. Why do you think the US invaded Iraq? There were no weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq. Even Osama didn't stay in Iraq. So what do you think? Before the invasion of Iraq, Saddam Hussein began a policy of accepting euro currency for the sale of oil. The US began to panic that this trend would continue. They have to stop OPEC from following the path of Iraq's lead to overthrow the present dominance of the USD currency. The war in Libya is not really any different. Some say that it is about protecting the civilians, some say it is about oil, but most of them have an opinion that it is ultimately about currency. Muammar Gaddafi began a policy of encouraging the purchase of their oil with gold, thereby bypassing the US dollar, making it more profitable for the OPEC. The African Union, on the advice of Muammar Gaddafi, began looking into their own single currency for trade, one that would be based on the gold dinar currency made from true gold. This dinar currency would rival the US dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. Should this be successfully implemented, it will have a devastating effect on the US dollar. Therefore, the US will not allow this at all costs. This, many say, is the main reason the US attacked Libya under the disguise of protecting the Libyan civilians. China no doubt sees this trend and is making their own play of world reserve currency. So, why is this important? The only thing that is keeping the dollar as the reserve currency right now is the petrodollar. That is why the US desperately holds on to this tiger regardless of anything. But confidence in the US has been sagging over the last few years, and that's where the danger lies. China now actually imports more oil from Saudi Arabia, the largest oil exporter in the world, than the US does. So we are actually seeing that basis being chipped away from China, and Russia, the second largest oil exporter in the world, is also open to taking other currencies as well. Thus, the question to all of us is, if China becomes Saudi Arabia's most important trading partner, then why would Saudi Arabia continue to only sell oil in US dollars? Once Saudi Arabia decides to go with the rest of the world and begins using other currencies for oil, as India, Iran, Russia and China already do, welcome to the new era of Yuan.